We're going to start out tonight, and number one, I know that most people think that it's the government that did this to them, and I'm going to tell you it isn't the government, it is yourself, and that's why we have to come together and have classes, because as you were growing up, you were taught not only by the government, by the government schools, but by your parents and everyone else, and you were taught the very opposite of what this is all about. Everything is upside down. Everything that you believe growing up as being true is not true. There's only one true thing in the world, and that's the creator of this world. Everything else has been polluted. So all of us have been taken in, and it just so happened that, 15 years ago, more than that now, back in the 80s, I started getting involved. I didn't get involved. The IRS started getting involved with me. And I didn't know anything about them all of my life. I'd made sure I did all of my things just right and all this. And so I made the mistake of going in business, and here they came. And so I happened to get crosswise with going after the business of one of the bigger companies in the country called UPS. And UPS didn't like it. So they always sicked the IRS on me. And so that things started happening. And so I didn't understand. I thought that when you paid somebody something, that was it. I mean, you were paying against something, and little did I know that you never pay anything in this country. You can't pay. There's no money to pay with. And so when they came after me, and it took me about 3 or 4 years before I'm out there and walking up and down by my place, right on back down here, Esther's Road, not Esther's Road, but Valley View. Had a little business down about Valley View and Northgate, and 10 acres of land there. We had a lot of, was fun, until all of a sudden these people started coming in, and I found out real quick you couldn't trust one of them. They weren't there to make sure that you, to get this thing paid and all this other, because we paid them $100,000 for $74,000 they said we owed, and not one penny ever went to paying that. And I couldn't understand this. And you talk to people, and nobody could. Oh, that's not true. There's just something wrong here. You obviously were doing something wrong. And so I couldn't, I couldn't equate this. And it wasn't until sometime later that that we started learning about the IRS. My older son, who had gotten into this, and my younger son, the older one got a check back for $11,000 after we started understanding what was going on. And then all of a sudden, my younger one, who is a CPA, demanded a meeting with them, and through Dick Army, he got a meeting with about 10 of them, and they said, "No, this is the worst case we've ever seen in our life. We don't know what happened to the money." And I said, "No, this is the way you do everyone." See, by that time, I understood a little bit about what was going on. And so this is what got me started in this. And little did I know, I never had any intention to get into this. All I wanted to do is them people to leave me alone. And they never do. And this is the way life is, as we go back in history and look at the United States. And all these people that came from Europe, what were they fleeing from? What were they trying to get away from? The very same people that you and I are trying to get away from today. The people who want to take you and make you a slave. And they do it in such a subtle way, and they teach us in such a subtle way, and they teach our parents, and and we came along and we started teaching our children. I know I talked to my daughter, finally got her to listen one day, and so she sat and listened for about 45 minutes, and she said, "But Dad, you taught us this." And I said, "I know I did, but I lied." So I said, "Now you need to understand," I said, "because this is going to take you down." What it's all about always is give you the appearance that you're free. You've heard this all your life. This is the freest country in the world. And so you get this notion that you're free to do anything you want to, and then all of a sudden you find out you can't, because you find a little piece of property way up in the hills. Nobody out there but you. So you decide you're going to go out there and build you a place. Well, somebody in the county, usually, if they find out you're out there building, they're going to come out and tell you have to have a permit. But no matter, you get it built. And the day you put the finishing touches on it and put the last little nail in it, about 16 agents show up from all these different agencies. And now you thought you were going out there to be free. You thought you were going out there to live life, and when you wanted to see people, you'd go and see people. And all of a sudden, here all these agencies come in. And now they're going to make sure you don't hurt the little purple fly, that you don't hurt the little frog, you don't hurt this, you don't hurt that. And, you can live there as long as you don't hurt all of these things. And so what we have been taught really is upside down and backwards, because we, the people, are the government. It is not the United States government. It is we, the people. We, the people, are the government. And the United States is a corporation who has grown so much and has taught us to trust in Washington, D.C., and has taught us to trust in Austin, Texas. You see, your government is really, should be only set up with an executive and a judicial branch, never a legislative. The reason for that is legislative can never write laws against the people's rights. But if you put a legislative branch in, guess what they did to us? They can write all of these laws simply because they have something in there called that they rule these territories. They can rule any kind of law they want to for the territories. And they put it out there, and everybody says, well, I guess that includes me too. When in reality, it does not include the people. This is brought forward real clear in Roosevelt's enslavement of the country in 1933. I believe that the United States, the corporation, was placed on a UCC-1, and I believe it was done by England. And they, at that point, claimed all the property in this nation. And so that's the first thing that he said when he first went into office, was all of the land and the property will now belong to the state, of the people will now belong to the state, and will be used for the good of the state. That's a strange thing, the first thing that he says when he goes into office. Most everybody thinks of the War Powers or the Trading with the Enemies Act. That came after that. That was the same day, but he made the declaration first. He had to get it into people's mind that the property now belonged to the state. And it's a funny thing how the government can say one little thing and everybody all of a sudden believes it. And so what happened then, at that point, he then took the gold away and left the people with no money to pay their debts with. And then they passed what is called HJR 192, and it said, since the people don't have money to pay a debt with, the government, the government is the Treasury. The Treasury will pay the debts of the people dollar for dollar. Now, what is that? If there's no money, if there's no silver, there's no gold, there's no money, how are you going to pay a debt? How's the government going to pay a debt? They simply issued you credit. And in all of the documents that are put together, they gave you an unlimited credit account. You have a preferred account with every corporation in this country. You have a prepaid account with every corporation. You were given preferred stock in the federal corporation. A corporation has to have assets in order to be a corporation. The only way that government could become a corporation is start issuing birth certificates. And that's where they got their assets from. It's through the birth certificate, putting a bond onto that birth certificate, bonding you into the federal warehouse, and then using those things as negotiable instruments and the means to create government bonds and government, not stocks, but government money, or what they consider money. And then they would take these to the Federal Reserve Bank, and the Federal Reserve Bank then would accept them, and then the government would print enough Federal Reserve notes to cover all of these things. They had all these birth certificates. Then we started getting old enough to, in 1938, they come up with the Social Security Act. Wasn't called Social Security Act then. People thought it was for old people when they retired, that they would retire and they'd have this little shoebox up there to have all their money, and they would simply order their little shoebox and it would come to them and they'd live happily ever after. But that isn't the way it is, because they changed it, and they changed it into a Social Security program, which means you pay into it, but other people get out of it, and you only get a little bit of it per month for the rest of your life. After you're, now it's up to, I think, about 70, I don't know, somewhere around there. But we all thought, see, and we started getting sold this idea because the Depression was a horrible thing for people back then. And they pulled the money out of the system. The bankers did. When you pull the money out, there's things to buy and sell, but nobody has money to buy them with. And so this is when they come up with this scheme of paper, fiat money. So you get rid of your gold and silver, you lose your law. People don't understand that, but if you don't have gold and silver, you don't have any law. The law belongs to the paper maker, to the paper producer. And so in 1926, you started getting the Bar Association out of New York. The British had, now theirs is called Regency in New York. I don't know why, most of it's registry, but British accredited Regency. They started in 1926 signing all of the laws coming out of Congress, along with the President and the Congress. The Justice Department quit signing off on them. And the reason for that is they were now starting to produce private law for corporations. And so they didn't need law for the people. They had no reason to write laws for people. But they started printing all these things up, and everybody thought they were under codes, rules, and regulations. And those are not law. But anyway, they started producing those things in 1926. Now there's well over 60 billion of them. I'm sorry, 60 million of them. This was about 10 years ago that there were 60 million of them. And so they started producing these things, and now I ask people, how many of those 60 million don't you know? See, this is our problem. What law are we supposed to follow? Do unto others, you'd have them do unto you, and that's the extent of the law. That's all of it. There is nothing else. That's the reason your government was set up in the county. If you'll look at your county government, that is where your executive and your judicial government is, because they have nothing to do. They just rule the county. In other words, they just make sure that the county has roads and bridges and things for the people to live in the manner they want to. The legislature was down in Austin, Texas. But all of a sudden, people started paying attention to this guy called governor. Texas don't have a governor. Texas is a republic. It has a president. And so all of a sudden, people start paying attention to this governor. And he happened to be down in Austin. And so their eyes started turning down to Austin. The legislature was set up. You'll go back and check your Texas history. They met every 2 years for about 30 days. Now that's not a very long time for someone who has to write laws against the rights of the people. So what the obvious thing was that they were never to write any laws against the rights of the people. They had nothing to do with the people. The people existed in their counties just the way they wanted to. In other words, the way that county wanted to rule itself. But the legislature part of it was to rule corporations and to deal with other states and other countries. And that's all it was ever for. And if you go back and check in history, it wasn't until about 1939 when the Bar Act was placed into the into the state. At that time, all of the attorneys had to join the bar, or they couldn't practice in the courts. And so then everything started shutting off from us. So the thing that really has killed the American people is that they have believed in the justice system. They believe that there's justice in this country. And yet you see time and time and time and time and time again of an injustice. You never see justice coming out of the courtroom. You just never see it. And the reason for that is that, and this has to be really must play on your mind. Otherwise, you are not going to ever understand the freedom part. They're simply giving us this since 1973. There have been no courts. And talking to a man that was here last 2 weeks in Mississippi, and he went back, and so he went in there and into the court and was sitting there watching. And he says, it's exactly, in fact, he said, I heard two attorneys come out of the courtroom saying, are you going to go into the chambers in a little bit? And so what you're getting is an administrative hearing in the judge's chambers. Translated, this means you're getting an administrative hearing in the King's Bank. And that is simply to take your money. And so the issue is they shut off the innocent plea. You don't understand, you can't have a court unless you have an innocent plea. And if somebody can't plead innocent, what are you going to try in court? You see? So then they took the intent of the law. And before 73, the state had to prove intent. Now the intent was placed with a charge, and the defendant had to prove he didn't intend to do something. Not that he didn't do it, but he did not intend to do it. It's an impossibility. You can never prove to me nor anyone else that you did not intend to run a red light. You cannot prove that. And so before you go in, then they have what is called a summary judgment. It comes through the called law merchants, which they brought in 1938. All of these things were to enslave us, but all of them were brought in very subtly. And they didn't come out and say we were doing this. But then all of a sudden, the American people, they got them to working, and they were earning money, they thought. And so they started turning out all of these doctors, lawyers, CPAs, everybody with a degree. And they started telling the people, look to those people, and they'll take care of your problems. If there's something about the law, get you an attorney. He's the one that knows the law. Well, if you were practicing law, that'd be fine. But that's not what goes on in the court. There's no law being practiced. It's simply an administrative hearing by the judge, and he makes up the rules as he goes along. Administrative hearing is the same as admiralty. You've heard about and seen, I'm sure, in some of the movies, where the old pirate captures somebody and takes them on his ship, and they don't stand a chance. In a little while, the sharks are all down there, and they say, walk the plank. He don't have a choice. He either gets a bayonet and stuck and pushed overboard, or he jumps overboard. This is what happens to you in the court. He is simply, it is admiralty law under the guise of administrative. That came about in 1946, the Administrative Procedures Act. But it didn't really impact the court until that famous year, 1973. And all this came together in that one year. You go back in history and you'll see attorneys, that's when they really started plea bargaining in earnest. Why? The defendant would never win. He couldn't. And I didn't find out until about 3 weeks ago why that was the way, why they made it that way. Because you've heard of the fact that there's supposed to be a bond when they charge you with something into the court. Somebody's got to be holding a bond on you. And the reason for that is if there's been miscarriage of justice, you can sue the district attorney or whoever it is that's prosecuting you. This is why they shut it off, to make sure that you couldn't, because all you have to do is file a criminal complaint as soon as you find out this guy's not guilty, that you weren't guilty. The jury finds you not guilty. That person then can sue the attorney who filed the charges against him. And he'll win every time. So they had to shut this off from the people being able to sue these district attorneys. And so they took the intent, put it with the charge, took the innocent plea away from you, and left you only with guilty. Now, where are you going if you plead guilty? Whatever they're going to do with you. Nolo contendere. If you don't do it again for 6 months, it won't go on your record. Not guilty. You say, boy, I'm not guilty, and I'm good. That isn't it. You're innocent. You're not guilty. Now you got to prove you didn't intend, and that's the worst one of all, is for you to try to prove you didn't intend to do something. So all this stuff came about, and so in about the 50s, they started like the little slot machines, the one-armed bandits. They started giving us 3 coins, and they only took 1 away. Boy, everybody thought they were, I know I did. In the 50s, I thought I was in tall cotton. I mean, you make a lot of money, and they hardly took any of it away from you. Didn't have the IRS breathing down your back all the time. 1960 to 1970, they gave you 3 coins, and then they took 2 away. 1980 to 1990, they gave you 3, they took 3 away. Now you're breaking even. 1990 to 2000, they give you 1, they're taking away 3. So this is what has happened to us, see, and you've worked as hard as you can. You build up this little nest egg, and you think the rest of my life I'm going to live, and boy, this is what I've been working for all my life. And so all of a sudden, you keep getting these tax bills on your property. The property's paid off. You say, I don't owe anybody anything. And all of a sudden, you keep getting these $3,000 to $5,000 a year tax bills on your property. And then you keep getting this sales tax on everything you buy. You see, what taxes are lawful are excise, import, and excise, import, and export. Those are lawful. Why? You know they're in the product. So why is gasoline tax lawful? You know the tax is there. You don't have to buy the gasoline. But the tax on your property is a debt that has been placed on you. The income tax is a debt that has been placed on you. All of these are going to suck your assets, those little assets that you've built up in your life, that you're now going to live on. They're all going to get taken away and sucked away from you. And this is being done, and we don't even sit here, because as long as you're able to go out to eat at night and take your children to the picture show and do all this other, you don't think too much about it. But it's all of a sudden when you retire, and I hear more and more people that retire, and all of a sudden one day they got to go back to work because they just can't make it on what is because they've taken away. They either lose it all in the stock market or they get it taken away by taxes or something else. But this is the subtlety of what they've done. Now, we are the ones who are responsible because each one of us have to take care of ourselves. This is not, in common law, class action suits are not allowed. Each person has to take care of himself or herself. So how do you do that? The same way you got into this mess is the way you're going to have to do it, and that is to educate yourself. You read about this stuff, you study it, and then all of a sudden, things start coming through your mind, and all these things start connecting. And I learn a lot of what I do from helping people, because you help them, and all of a sudden you see in their documents, you start reading them, and you see what they're doing. And so you start formatting things to counteract what they're doing. And so you have as smart a mind as any attorney that's ever lived. Not as devious, but as smart. You have as smart a mind as any doctor that's ever lived. Now, I'm not telling you when you break your leg that you can study a book and learn how to fix it. You go to a doctor, that's what he's for. But it's a man told me the other day, and this is the way it is. He went to the doctor, and he said, well, this is what I've been doing. I've been taking, homeopathic stuff and this type of stuff. And the guy says, where'd you say you went to school? He said, SMU. He said, do they have a medical school in SMU? He said, no. He said, then you don't know anything about medicine. What are you doing telling me anything? And this is the attitude, see. Why? They have to make their position as up here so they can charge you like crazy down here. If they can convince you they're so much smarter than you that you can't figure how to take an aspirin tablet, that they're going to make a lot of money out of you. This is the same thing with attorneys. Why in the world? There are well over 3 million people in federal prison alone. There are way more than that in all the state prisons. Every one of them had a lawyer. You have to have a lawyer in federal court or they cannot put you in prison. And they say they're criminal. I don't say they're criminal. There says right over the criminal district attorney. They pretty well say what they are. And so all I'm telling you is that, and people say, start telling me about their preacher, my preacher. Well, who is my preacher? If you believe in someone, why don't you say him? Why don't you say I believe in him? Why would you ever believe in a man? Why would you ever believe in a man? I don't care who they are. The majority of everything going on in this country now is to get your money, what they think is money. It is to get your assets and to make you work 3 jobs a day instead of 2. And then if you work 3, I don't know when you're going to sleep, but you work 3 jobs a day, and you're going to have, you say, well, I can live pretty good, but I don't know when I'm going to be able to enjoy what I'm getting. And you see where this thing goes. And then I have people, and they say, well, I'm going to file bankruptcy. I can't pay my bills. I said, where are you going to get the money to pay the attorney? Never had thought of that. $1,500 up to get one to file bankruptcy for you. Where are you going to get the $1,500? Use that to pay some of the bills. And all he's going to do is he's going to slide you right through the bankruptcy, and I went through it, and so didn't get an attorney, and filed all my papers, and I found that wasn't that difficult, and I learned a lot while I was in there. I learned that all you had to do is, where's the contract? And everybody shut up. Nobody wanted to talk about contracts, and yet that's what you're being judged by every day of your life. You realize every